Hello, magical people. My name is Luminix, and welcome to my video. This one is the fourth video in my Pride series, and I'm going to be talking about misinformation in this one. And I don't know if you've noticed, but to be totally real for a moment, 2025, I am just staggered and stunned by the amount of misinformation that there is out there. It literally seems to permeate every aspect of our lives, and it is kind of demoralizing. So, in an effort to combat that sense of feeling demoralized, I'm going to take just the tiniest bite out of misinformation as it pertains to queer and trans folks. So, I'm not going to obviously address all of the misinformation that there is out there around queer and trans folks, because that would just be a gigantic task, and frankly, I'm not up to it right now. So I'm instead going to be looking at the three things that I most commonly come across. And we're going to start with the first one, which is that trans people are new and everywhere. And this is obviously wrong on both counts. With regards to the trans people being new, no. I think it is fair to say that the word transgender is relatively new as the history of linguistics goes, but that doesn't mean that trans people haven't always existed. And in fact, there are several historians out there that have documented the lives of people who were trans all around the world. These people existed, and some of them were pretty extraordinary figures. I'm not a historian. I made no notes about those people, so I'm not going to regurgitate any of that information to you right now, but I would encourage you to maybe search on YouTube or search on Google for historical trans people, and you will find some really fascinating stories about people who lived their trans lives and received affirmation and acceptance from their communities. Some of them did not, and those stories have tragic endings. But regardless, the fact remains is that trans people have always been here, and trans people will always be here. Transgender folk are just a natural occurring aspect of the broad spectrum of humanity. With regards to the idea that trans people are everywhere, I will say that with the exception of this current backlash that we are living through right now, that in whole, over the last 10, 12 years or so, there has been greater visibility for trans folks. And as that visibility has increased, that I think has given knowledge or courage to people who then subsequently came out. And it kind of reminds me of stories I've heard about when left handedness became socially acceptable for the first time. And there was this period of time shortly following that where you see a really steep increase in the number of left handed people, giving the impression that, oh my gosh, at this rate, everybody's going to be left handed. But in fact, what happened is that that quickly plateaued. And I think that this would be the same thing. There's no reason to think otherwise, and best estimates that I've heard from people who are well more versed and knowledgeable in these fields than I have said that it's probably between 1% to 2% of the population. So that. Also, I do want to point out that with regards to the whole, like a lot of the talking points that we hear around trans people, is just blatant replays of the exact same talking points that were used during the Lavender Scare to talk about gay people. And for those of you not familiar, the Lavender Scare was this period of time in the United States, predominantly during the 50s and 60s, although, of course, the after effects lingered to quite some time and in some ways still do. Um, but it was this period of time where there was just a lot of open bigotry around gay people, and gay people weren't even allowed to hold federal jobs. There were all of these talking points about gay people being communists or unsafe to allow around children. And again, you see what I mean by these talking points just being regurgitated and updated to scratch out homosexual and insert transgender. And it's really, at the end of the day, frankly, it's unimaginative. And it's bullshit, and it was bullshit then, and it's bullshit now, and it's not even creative, and that is just frankly fucking pathetic. Okay, so piece of misinformation number 2. Let's talk for a bit about trans women in bathrooms. So there have been a lot of laws or policies that have come up of late that is supposed to bar specifically, I mean, specifically, this is really about trans women's being in women's bathrooms and how somehow that makes cis women unsafe. And first of all, I would like to point out that there is no actual evidence to point to this being an accurate claim to make. Um, in fact, there's plenty of evidence to the contrary. And by that, what I mean is that by enacting laws and policies that are supposedly intended to keep trans women out of women's bathrooms, um, the harm is done to cis women who are trying to use women's bathrooms. Not exclusively, of course, but if you've been watching the news lately, you may have seen that there were several high profile stories of cis women being either verbally or physically assaulted while just trying to take a pee because somebody suspected that they were trans. And I don't know all of the cases involved, but I do know that at least a few of the cases that I saw some coverage of, these cis women happened to be perhaps gender nonconforming in some way. And so basically, what that means is that they didn't fit the stereotype of what some people think a woman should look like. And so they thought that they were trans, they called them out for being trans. Violence and terrible things ensued, and in fact, it wasn't even a trans person. So, while it is obviously fair to say that having laws and policies like this in place obviously harms trans people as well, in fact, it also harms cis people. And so, this is kind of this, I don't know if people think they're doing the right thing. It's hard to imagine with the preponderance of evidence available to us right now that they could actually still think they're doing the right thing. I tend to think that these people are just literally blinded to reality by their bigotry and hatred. And as a result, the people that they claim they're trying to protect end up being amongst the people harmed. Whereas if these laws and policies aren't in place, there's nobody being harmed. And, I'm lucky enough to live in a pretty queer friendly city, and I've been challenged more, like a bunch of times, going in trying to use the bathroom or the restroom. So, not only is there lots of actual evidence to this fact, but I also have anecdotal evidence for my own self. Um, I do also want to point out with regards to trans people being in bathrooms that, well, one, we're talking about humans here, and all humans have the same basic needs, which are to, sometimes have to take a pee uh, when you're not at home. And I think what a lot of these laws are in reality trying to do is they're trying to legislate away trans people from public spaces. And like this just in so many ways, all of this shit just really comes down to basic fucking human rights, folks. Like, I don't even know what to say. Like, if you are in opposition to me on these points, I don't know, do better. Just do better, be better, take a deep look at yourself, because this shit is really just about the most basic, fundamental human rights. Anyhow, okay, so moving on to the third and last, and probably the one I'll talk about the most, we'll see how much I get through these points, is, but, they're transing the kids. Misinformation point number 3. So I want to talk a little bit about rapid onset gender dysphoria. So this was a term that came out in 2018. I can't remember the lady's name, but she authored a paper wherein she had surveyed parents of trans kids, and basically asked them the question of to describe their quote sudden and rapid onset of gender dysphoria and if it coincided with their friends coming out. So the interesting thing about this original paper is that most of the sources for this survey were recruited from specifically anti-trans Facebook pages, Reddit pages, online forums, and websites. So, of course, if you're going to a place where there's a bunch of transphobic parents and you ask them, oh, well, all of these questions, then like you're not doing good and you're not doing good data collecting. Like the methodology is flawed, and it has since come out. Many people have pointed out the logic of this, of using this methodology, and the whole idea of rapid onset gender dysphoria has been thoroughly debunked over and over and over again. Yet, because it is 2025 and this is just the shittiest fucking timeline, this is something that we still hear people talking about today, and it's utter fucking trash. And let me tell you why. So let's just go through the logic of this for a minute. So the facts that we know are that most of the people who answered this questionnaire were recruited from an anti-trans forum or website. So let's assume that I'm a parent of a trans kid and I am spending my time in an anti-trans forum where I'm raging about how this is all wrong, bad, bullshit, whatever. And then somebody asks me, oh, did this just come out suddenly? Did your kid just suddenly change on you? You had no idea what was happening, and then come to find out they have a friend or two who also is coming out as trans? Well, let's think about this. We've already framed the reality that this person, this parent, is not a loving, affirming parent to their child. So if you're a trans kid and you think your parents are going to not take it well or punish you or treat you poorly or abuse you for coming out to them as trans, chances are good that you are not going to be the first person that they go to when they start questioning things. So, from your perspective as a transphobic parent, yeah, it may seem sudden, but that's only because you weren't a safe person for your child to go to in the first place. So, the logic of this is just so evident. Um, let's see, sorry, notes. Another point is that people talk a lot about how they're doing surgery on children. And frankly, that's just not true. There is a there are medical guidelines that are widely accepted and that are in place, and the gender affirming care for minors is slow and intentional and always starts with therapy regardless of the age. That's always the first step. And there's a few things that come up before any treatment for or guidance for transition occurs. there's a few key points that have to show up among that care providers are looking for. And one of them is consistent, persistent, and insistent behavior. So that's why therapy is the first step. So this all starts with a kid being able to talk to a licensed mental health care provider who is knowledgeable about these things and just allow that child a safe place to do some exploration. Sometimes there are there is a transition that will take place, but again, transition is always age appropriate. So if you have a young kid, then transition simply means social transition, where you're talking about maybe clothing or a haircut or a nickname that's used, like all very simple, very easy things. And and if the trans kid is in fact starting to go through certain stages of puberty, it's not until that point that puberty blockers are potentially even discussed, let alone implemented. And the sole purpose of puberty blockers is really to just buy a little time, do a little bit more investigation, while at the same time not having a kid be tortured by going through the wrong puberty for them. And in fact, I want to point out that recently there was a study that came out of Utah that was actually commissioned by anti trans lawmakers. And this study found that gender affirming care generated, quote, positive mental health and psychosocial functioning outcomes, end of quote. The report further states that, again, quote, policies that prevent access to hormone therapy for minors cannot be justified based on scientific findings or concerns about potential regret in the future. Again, I want to reiterate that this is a recent study, just came out in 2025, and that again, it was commissioned by people who were anti trans legislators. And still, like, this is over and over and over again, this is what the studies find. There's so much talk out there about people butchering children, and fucking Trump during his campaign had this talking point about sending children to school and having them come home a different gender. And like, first of all, have you ever known a teacher? They like fucking have to buy their own crayons. They're obviously not paying for kids to get surgery. Like, it's just so, I mean, beyond all of the other bullshit about how that would just never fucking happen, like, just that alone is like, are you kidding me? Who are you talking about? Do you know how schools work? Like, come on, man. Shit's been underfunded for years. But the simple fact of the matter is that there are very few surgeries done on minors that are associated with gender affirming care for trans people. There are sometimes surgeries done, and like I said, it's pretty rare, but it's not like it never happens. But when it does happen, it's typically if you're talking about a trans man who has already gone through an endogenous female puberty that maybe has large breasts, and that person is binding. And when the body is still growing, binding can be harmful. So sometimes the decision is made with a 16 or 17-year-old. So again, a minor, but like an older minor, the decision is made is that there would be greater harm by that trans guy self medicating by binding than there would be by just allowing the surgery to happen. And in fact, it's actually more common than trans guys who are minors getting top surgery is cis boys getting top surgery because of a condition called gynecomastia, which is where breast tissue grows in somebody who is otherwise a cis boy. So I don't want to say it never happens, but it happens very rarely. And bottom surgery never happens on minors because it's just you need to wait for stuff to be done growing before you can appropriately surgically work with it. Honestly, I think surgery is like, I'm not a medical person. It's a lot of big words. I really don't know a lot about it, but I do know that that is one of the reasons why bottom surgery isn't done on minors. It is, of course, an informed consent thing. You do want to wait for kids to be older until they're actually adults to be making decisions for themselves. But even beyond that, it's just a matter of the simple mechanics of how these sorts of surgeries work and where you want people to be physically in order for those surgeries to allow a greater degree of success. That's all besides the point. I'm getting into the weeds. The last point I have to make is that actually two final points that I have to make that I hope kind of wrap up this aspect of it. One, all major medical organizations in the United States consider gender affirming care to be safe, effective, and medically necessary of trans youth. Let me say that again. All major medical organizations in the United States consider gender affirming care to be safe, effective, and medically necessary for trans youth. That's pretty major. And by the way, a recent Trump regime report questioned widely accepted treatment standards, and RFK Jr., who's obviously awful, did not release information about who authored this scientific report, which, if you know anything about anything, you know that's not how scientific reports work. This shit is published with names, with credentials, and that shit is peer reviewed. And RFK did not release information about who authored the report, and major medical groups said they were not consulted. It is a time of much, much misinformation. If you don't understand trans people or queer people, that's okay. If they make you uncomfortable, that's your shit to deal with, not mine. But if you're using that ignorance and discomfort to hurt people based on bullshit misinformation to back up your icky feelings, I would invite you to spend a few more times investigating where your discomfort actually lies and come to terms with some shit and stop taking it out on trans people. Sorry I got so stern at the end there. That's not usually my jam. Maybe it's because I've taken 84 takes of this video so far and it's still 24 minutes long. But c'est la vie, it's fucking done. I got through all of my notes, and if you're here, leave a sparkle in the comment. And above all else, don't forget to be kind and gentle with yourselves. And I mean that. Like, even if you do find that you hold bigoted views within yourself, or that you unquestioningly have taken in some of these pieces of misinformation and assumed them to be true, like, being kind and gentle with yourself doesn't mean challenging yourself, and it doesn't mean allowing yourself to change. It just means that as you take accountability and as you allow yourself to expand, that you don't unnecessarily beat yourself up and hold yourself back in the process. Anyhow, I'm pooped. Take it easy. I think there's going to be at least one more in the Pride video series, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, other than that, see you soon, folks. Bye.